there's so many different scenarios that have occurred that they've experienced that a check instructor may never experience, but they might. And there's no training around that. I've got examples from DPEs, active DPEs today flying around using our software that have literally had people threaten to kill them, just threatened to crash the plane when they fail that exam. People that have have threatened to kill themselves.
AI is changing a lot of things, and I go down this diatribe right now. But what trends do you see coming in aviation technology over the next 5 to 10 years, inside or outside of the cockpit?
Welcome to the Aviation Mentors Podcast, the podcast that takes your dreams of flight and turns it into reality.
Sponsored by Strass Financial, financing your flight training.
For pilots, by pilots. I'm Brandon Martini, a commercial pilot and flight instructor.
And I'm Carson Vasquez, I'm a private pilot.
Whether you're a seasoned pilot or beginner with dreams of flight,
Aviation Mentors is your source for expert insights, industry trends, and inspiring stories.
So fasten your seatbelts and prepare for this incredible journey through the skies.
And stay connected with us on social media for exclusive content.
And visit our website at www.aviationmentors.com and let us be your co-pilot on this adventure.
Welcome back, everybody, to another awesome and, of course, amazing episode of the Aviation Mentors Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am very excited today because we have another guest, Carson.
I love having a guest. It's always something interesting, and they don't have to hear just us every time.
I know. As long as we love our friendly voices and our beautiful faces, it's always nice to have another friendly face and beautiful voice on the channel. So, Adam, we'd love to welcome you to the Aviation Mentors Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, anytime. So, Carson, take it away.
Adam, I always ask one question to begin every single time, and I'd love to hear the answer because it's always something different, but always the same at the core. How'd you get in aviation? What really gave you the bug? How'd you get started? And where'd you go with it?
I didn't come from an aviation family, so it was not. I didn't have a parent that was a pilot. Didn't really have much upbringing around it too much. But I was just the kid that just always was looking at the sky, looking at aircraft, right? And so that was always an interest of mine. And then by the time I got into high school, of course, I was part of the Top Gun generation as well. So Top Gun obviously inspired so many of us. But I got to high school and I finally had the opportunity to start taking flying lessons. And I was like, this is absolutely amazing. It's everything I thought it would be. Maybe that's what I want to do with my life. And so I kind of set down that path, and then life took hold of me. I ended up more in the software side of things as well. But it's just always been a passion, kind of a weird passion. I'm looking at aircraft all the time. I live on controller.com like every day just to see what's happening in the sales market.
What are you looking at buying?
Yeah, exactly. What's the market doing? What's the used value going for a 182 or a SR20, right? So I don't know what it is. It's just I got the bug early, and I love anything that flies. I'm interested in it. I want to get into it, and it's been an amazing journey to get to meet so many people over the years that have done some really amazing types of flying as well.
Well, speaking of loving flying and all of that, I want to tell everybody a little bit about you. Carson, you want to tell us about him?
So Adam's a lifelong aviation enthusiast and an active private pilot, unlike me, who just can only fly when I get the time.
Or I let him off.
Or lets me off, yeah. He's been flying for about 20 years, and he's helped multiple aviation software companies across general and just business aviation grow market share, expand into new geographies, and develop a product market fit. And he's been a part of multiple startup journeys, like we all have, before starting his own, which I totally understand. He understands the challenges, processes, and the importance of developing software systems that solve real-world customer pain points, especially within the aviation industry.
Yeah, Adam's also the CEO of PilExOS, if I can say that right. I've tried like 3 times today. He said I got it right the first time. He's going to have to say it 3 more times for me to know it for sure. But they're the industry leader in flight exam quality management software for flight schools and pilot examiners, also known as DPEs, providing visualized evaluator tools, centralized data, check instructor oversight, and streamlined scheduling. I know I've talked to Adam several times over the past couple of years about his software as he's been developing it. And now that it's out, I am very stoked to have him on to kind of talk a little bit about that. But I would love to kind of start off with one other question along the technology side, because that's what you do today. And that's where your That's where your personalities intersect, technology and aviation. Since you've been a pilot for 20 years, how's that shaped your perspective on aviation technology and what's changed in the industry? I know I've been a pilot for, I think, 14 or 15 years, so I'm slightly behind you, but I've seen the massive changes, and I'd love to know your perspective on it.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to think just when I started flying, what wasn't there, what I did not have really access to, and the tools that were just kind of coming online at the time versus what it is today. The EFB market is dramatically different now as one of the easiest viewpoints, especially in general aviation, of just how powerful these software systems have become to really increase situational awareness. So from that perspective, from the pilot's point of view, I, it- I just some of the having access to a tool like that, uh, you know, when I started flying would have just been absolutely amazing because a lot of the questions you're trying to visualize in your head, you're drawing it on paper, and it's like, man, it's right there in front of you. So the EFB market and what's happening across general and business aviation has been amazing to see the the systems in place around flight sim and operation systems tied to the flight schools. There's just been so much advancement in virtualizing all these different pain points across the different levels of training, even to gain insight into what we can do to track and better enhance and improve on training. So um, anywhere you touch in general or business aviation, other than commercial aviation, it has evolved and it's continuing to evolve. Now we can kind of see that next evolution with technology as it's coming. I'm sure we'll talk about it. How powerful it is now versus what I had when I first started. Honestly, I'm jealous of people learning to fly today. But at the same time, you have to understand that software systems can fail too. So you still have to learn basic principles and always be prepared that if that iPad dies or AVNX goes down, the redundancy is not there, whatever the case, you still got to fly that plane. So
What did I tell
Exactly.
you on our last episode?
Well, our last episode, we had a whole debate on whether or not you needed paper charts or not, and Carson's. I used to think you needed them at all times, but then I've done so many across the country flights in a two-seater, four-seater, or six-seater airplane, and I'm like, I would just be piled with paper. Like it's just not going to happen. So he comes I, from the world of hey, and I taught him this, by the way. It's totally a problem that I instilled, but you got to have paper. And now I'm kind of the other way. And when you were talking about that, I looked up because I started learning how to fly in 2013, 2014. So I wanted to find out what when I was learning to fly, it was not legal to only have an iPad in the plane and fly with ForeFlight or something, no EFBs. So I looked it up, and the advisory circular that gave the authorization for use of electronic flight bags was issued on 10/22 of 2017. And for any av nerds out there like me, it's AC 120-76 Delta. Uh, and it's a trip because there's so many people that we still hear of their iPads dying and technology failing. So I had a personal thing. If the student really wanted to use an iPad, then they had to know how to use it without moving map, because that was important. Because if GPS goes out, you need to know how to not use moving map. And then outside of that, you need to have two additional backups. So you have to have that. You have to have your phone, and you have to have an extra iPad that's charged and put in a bag somewhere. And that would be the only way I would let somebody go on a cross country without paper. So how many iPads can you buy with $15 sectional charts would be the question for me.
it's wild. I mean, even avionics, you think of the avionics stacks now. Whenever I first started, it was '06. I think G1000 came out, what, '03, '04, brand new. So I hadn't seen a G1000 until probably 2009.
Wow.
First one I saw delivered in a Skyhawk. And so, it's just night and day what training looks like and the technology in these aircraft versus what we started with. So it's amazing to see. It's extremely powerful. Little envious of it because
Oh, totally.
it's fun to play with. That's for sure.
I remember when I first bought my first glass cockpit airplane. It was a 1967 Piper Arrow, and it's 180 horsepower or 200 horsepower. Wasn't high performance because it wasn't 201. But yeah, the Arrow, it had a full glass cockpit in it because the prior owner totally decked it out, and it had the G500 in it, which wasn't the predecessor. It came out after, the G1000 and was meant for installation in GA aircraft and was certified like that. By the way, anybody listening, you cannot go buy a G1000 and go put it in some airplane. It's not certified for that. You can only put it in an airplane that already had a G1000 certified for that, if anybody's curious. But yeah, the first time I flew a glass cockpit, I actually got in the airplane myself in San Diego and I flew it home. And I have to say it was overwhelming. There was just too much going on. I had all the maps overlaid with everything and there was no autopilot. So I'm like losing altitude and gaining altitude. It was horrendous. I should have definitely had training. But I lived to fly another day and now I've flown lots of glass cockpit over time and it's worked out just fine.
That same plane is my first glass cockpit, and where most of my hours in flight are.
Yeah, so it's worked out. Next question I want to ask you is, obviously check rides are an issue today. There's a DPE shortage, just like there's been a pilot shortage getting all the way up. And obviously there's times where it's solved and time that it's not. But overall, it's still very, very hard to get a DPE. And I know that I went through the process a couple years ago to become a DPE. I got all the way up to my interview, but because they only had limited number of people that could monitor those DPEs at the FSDO that I applied at, they couldn't take all of us. And out of 5 people, they only took 1. I was not the one. If they would have taken all 5 of us, it would have probably solved the DPE issue in our area. At least it had a good ability to do so. And if they were able to do that across the nation, we could probably solve that as well. What are you seeing in the DPE market? How bad is the DPE shortage really today? Is it not even a shortage and it's just a lack of ability to connect with other DPEs? I'm really curious on kind of your holistic perspective on this.
Yeah, it's a tough one because at the end of the day, the data is not clear enough to really determine what the real overarching problem is, and it also changes by region, right? So depending on what FSDO you're operating, what region, it definitely has bigger impact. I know I've heard stories from some that are waiting, months to get anything even scheduled in some parts of the country. In other parts, like here in the Midwest, I mean, it might take 2 weeks. So it really depends on geographic location. Every FSDO is kind of different, right? So depending on what's happening out of that FSDO is going to change some things. Um, I'm not so sure, and I'm not 100% convinced we have necessarily a DPE shortage. I think one thing that you can see in some of the numbers that have come out recently as well, and some examiners have been all produce some of this data, pulling it from government resources, but a small subsection of examiners in the country are doing well over 80% of the check rides in the country. So when I see that number, what I think is, okay, well, we may not have a shortage of actual examiners. We might have an efficiency problem, right? Maybe we just don't have enough examiners that can dedicate the amount of time that we need in order to get to that, that 200 check rides a year mark, right? And what's difficult about the problem is that, the FAA can't afford to go and hire examiners to be full time, right? There's
Yeah.
just not enough money in the budget, and even if they could do that, even if that was approved by Congress and they were able to get that done, then those individuals would not make nearly the money they would flying for an airline, right? So there's not even a good argument that you could say, well, we need full time. Yeah, maybe we did. That's part of the old model. I think we're fine with having these individuals come on as essentially independent contractors. It's just, who are we bringing on? How much time can they really dedicate consistently month over month to check rides? Given that they all have day jobs, the majority of them, the majority have day jobs, 1 or 2 maybe. And so it becomes part of the, okay, well, what level of capacity do they have? Where are they operating at in the country? And are they willing to travel? We see that a lot. A lot of examiners are going to these hotspots and they're trying to help with the workload, which is great. But there's really no clear answer to what you can do here. Now, there's a lot of progress being made with the central office, with AFG 970. So you're seeing that transition happening. Okay, we're starting to consolidate some of the oversight. We're bringing in DPEs more kind of at a faster pace now through that office, which is good to see. But then it still kind of leaves the question mark of, well, what does that really do for capacity? And ultimately, how are we going to pull any additional data from this, right? And so we get into the problem that we have with PilExOS. What we're trying to solve and presenting to the market is centralized systems, centralized solutions that capture all aspects of the flight exam process start to finish. So you have one data set across the whole system. Whereas right now we're operating silos by FSDO, by individual examiner. What do they use? Like, it's just, when you have silos and you have everything that's completely segmented in data, how can you really get clear answers? So it's hard. It's a hard question. I think we have an efficiency problem for sure. I'm not 100% sure we have a capacity problem based on the volume or the actual number of DPEs. It's just which ones of those can really dedicate the time to doing 10 plus a month.
I think you solved this in a similar way that you just solved, or that they're trying to solve the CFI non-expiration issue, right? Like, my CFI now never expires, but I do have to have a recency of experience qualification to it, or I just need to do the traditional kind of biannual every other year, right? So I can either do that, and I think for DPEs, there's only one way to solve this. Hey, you're required to do X, Y, and Z number of check rides per month or per year. Otherwise, you lose your DPE, because then they don't have to waste that oversight. They also have to go to training once or twice a year. They can get rid of that training too for those people. If they're not actually a DP and they're not active being a DP, then get rid of them. I
Do
don't
you
see
think
what
there's
there's
empty spots? Just, there's DPs that are in use but not actually.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, that's insane.
It's all
Yeah.
over the place. It's like the 80-20 rule. Like, 20% is doing 80% of the work, right?
Yeah, I think around, like, what is the number? And one of my examiners, DPs, he's big with us, helping us out, and he's very involved in the community. He's like, I think it's around 400 or so DPs are doing well over 80% of the check rides in the country. And so, that's a big percentage for a small number compared to the total. And so that's what I look at as, okay, we don't have capacity, we have efficiency. And that's going to come down to the FAA and some kind of policy change and policy shift and how they want to, ultimately enforce that or mandate it. But in all of that, where we sit in PilExOS is like, we want to help provide insight into that through efficiency. And we can do that through operation software, tying them in. So they can run their business essentially as a DP on one system. And if you can scale that across all examiners, then everybody's operating in one bucket. Now we can search and figure out ultimately, okay, well, what is the actual wait time by individual across every region, across every FSDO, by every exam type. But there's a lot of complexity in how they run their day to day, right? Because schedules are so crazy for these individuals that are DPs flying professionally. I mean, that's also part of where our software came into play, is like, how do we automate a lot of this for you to take away the administrative task, just to make it easier for you, because there's so much they have to do. And then they start getting hit up 40, 50 times a day for a request. It becomes overbearing. And a lot of people don't realize about DPEs, like what they have to go through just on a consistent basis. So, we started this whole thing to say, okay, how can we help you guys? Because we can help you guys, provide you with the right tools and the right levels of insight and automation to make your life easier. Then that's how we can go help the rest of the system, the flight schools trying to get to you, the applicants trying to get to you, bring it together in one cohesive platform. And if you can do that successfully, the data you can pull from that is extremely powerful. That's what doesn't exist right now, because there is no centralized viewpoint of all of it. It's everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, there's a list with phone numbers, and you got to call them and hope for the best, or hope that someone knows something about their schedule.
And half of those DPs get pissed off when you call them. They're like, why isn't your flight instructor calling me? And it's like, my instructor told me to call you. I swear I've heard that so many times. Yep. It's like, one instructor is, the student needs to call me, one DPE, the student needs to call me, the instructor needs to call me. You can only book through my website in advance, and you have to pay this. It's wild, the differences out there. I wish there was just a standardization of that as well. And hopefully your website will do that as well.
You know what time it is, Carson?
Time's up, Brandon.
It's time to talk about one of our favorite companies.
Which company would that be?
Aviation Mentors is excited to be sponsored by the one and only Stratus Financial, dedicated to supporting the next generation of future aviators.
Stratus Financial really understands the financial challenges that students face in pursuing their aviation dreams. That's why they offer student loans specifically tailored to aspiring pilots.
With competitive rates and flexible repayment plans, Stratus Financial helps take your aviation education to new heights.
So go visit their website today at www.stratus.finance. Just to be clear, that is not .com, it's .finance. And embark on your journey towards a sky full of possibilities.
Carson, it's time to get back to what we do best.
The show.
The show.
I had another question. I want to go kind of sideways on this a little bit. I've been a board member for officially Aviation Mentors is a board member of NFTA. By the way, the date of recording, we're doing our official press release on that. So
I'm putting this on my LinkedIn.
you can put it on your LinkedIn.
Hot damn.
Yeah, as Aviation Mentors is the official. I am technically the board member, but I paid the money, so it's a little different of NFTA. So the reason why I bring up NFTA is NFTA is working on 141 modernization right now. They are the biggest kind of proponent of it. They're trying to lead the charge through Congress and get it through. And the goal of that is to make it so schools that are actually 141 mean something, right? Like I used to own 2 Part 141 flight schools, 2 separate certificates. And honestly, it didn't do much for most people. It could speed up some things, and it was only good for some people. It wasn't fantastic. And if you want to do it on a commercial basis, like the commercial pilot program, I've never had one person go through the commercial pilot program. It doesn't make any sense. The only time the 141 program makes any sense is so you can get financing, used to be, but you also had to do a bunch of other things, and that was through one of my competitors. Okay, now that's no longer needed with Stratus Financial funding over 500 individual flight school locations across the U.S., right? And we're only in 38 states. It's still growing. So that's kind of gone. Now it's to get VA money. Well, guess what? VA only pays out like $14,300 something a year. At least that's what it was a year or two ago. Okay, so that doesn't get you through. So now it's not good for 2 things. The only thing that it can be good for is creating partnerships with collegiate programs, which now the collegiate programs are just creating their own programs, so they don't want to go partner with you anyways. Okay, so now that's out. The last thing that you can actually do is have in-house DPEs. Basically have your chief do all the check rides for your students, and you can actually issue pilot certificates. The problem is there are only a handful in the United States that have been granted that. And I know in the past couple of years, there have been additional granted. Several of our partner schools have gotten that ability recently, actually. But I want to know what your perspective is, Adam, on the 141 schools doing their own check rides. Do you think that's a good thing? Do you think it's a bad thing? I know you have it's advantageous for DPEs in your field because that's how you'll make more money, right? But is there a way that you can integrate that as well? Tell me your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about PilExOS when we started, it was to create this centralized system to help with scheduling and optimization as core one, help DPEs and figure out what their day looks like, what their process looks like, what tools they have to use to hit ACO standards and to get through an entire check ride process, get into DMS. Like, what does it look like to help them and learn from that? And these individuals have so much wisdom and experience and the scenarios and what they can bring to the table. That information, we always knew we were going to grow this thing once we solved a lot of those problems. We were going to go to the schools and say, look, we're going to give you the same capabilities through what we're calling Check Ride Manager. That's the portal for flight schools now that we offer up. And so schools have their own problems when it comes to tracking and scheduling, stage checks, EOCs, check rides, all of that. Being tied to a flight school in the past, at scale, that becomes a big job. In some cases, many people, it's a full-time job. So there's a component there that we wanted to bring that same level of tracking, visibility, and streamlined scheduling to the schools. But then all that data comes in, and what it becomes on top of it is the tools from the examiner, like a plan of action, is extremely valuable in the sense of linking that data, that information of the outcome to the exam and all that data tied to the student and the instructor. And so we've been building out basically which is our quality management system within it. So when you look at schools that either have examining authority or going for examining authority, and the concerns that are out there around, well, if we allow more schools to have examining authority, what does that mean for training? There's a lot of what if scenarios there, like, there's a little bit of pressure on that check instructor to pass the student, right? That's the public perception in some cases. there's concern from DPEs about the quality. A check instructor to a flight school that might be able to grant a PPL on an end of course. Well, they don't have to go through as much training and oversight as the DP does with the FAA, right? And so there's got to be, if we're going to expand that, we're going to give more power to it. There's got to be better systems in place at the school level around quality control and quality management. How are we testing them? What are we capturing? What are we learning from it? And how can we take that data, be able to present it quickly to the FAA and say, here's what we're doing to act more like a DP within our own organization. So here are the tools we utilize. Here's the data that we utilize. Here's how we're putting it back in our training and using that, especially towards our check instructors, to ensure proficiency of training. So it's taking the capabilities and the tooling of a DPE and putting it into the school and saying, okay, we're going to act more like you guys. We're going to use the tools that you guys use, and we're gonna try to essentially make this a more streamlined process that has valuable data that can actually be purposeful, so that the public perception image of examining authority is not there. You have to have the systems in place virtualized because it's got to be randomized, right? If we're using the same thing over and over again, the gouge comes into play, and you're
Mhm.
just testing for that. And we hear that all the time, you're testing for the gouge. And so, schools have to be aware of this from the public perception. Instructors need to be thinking outside of that. And what you'll hear constantly from examiners, DPs are adamant that there's so many different scenarios that have occurred that they've experienced that a check instructor may never experience, but they might. And there's no training around that. I've got examples from DPEs, active DPEs today flying around using our software that have literally had people threaten to kill them, threaten to crash the plane when they fail that exam. People that have have,
Wow.
threatened to kill themselves. There's so many weird scenarios that these DPs have to go through that at the school level, that's not really being taught, right? Because you just don't think of it, right? And so if we're going to open up that door, and I think there's a strong point. I'm also on NFTA, right? So, I came into it specifically with kind of bring the voice of the DPE customer to this discussion and saying, if we're going to unlock this capability for more schools that hit all the requirements, they've got the year plus of data, they've got the process, they got the quality management system in place, and they can show and explain what that is and how they're going to utilize it. They need to understand that there's got to be better training quality as part of this as well. There's got to be a shared distribution of that knowledge, and that's one of the core missions we have, is bringing that knowledge from the DP side into the flight school. So it's one completely interconnected platform between the exam itself, the scheduling, cutting down on the pains there, but then taking all of this and saying, what is a quality management system at the examiner level? So there's a lot of things that have to occur there, and that's the main mission we have, is just bringing all of this into one bucket. So if a school does that, then they'll have better visibility. There are better tools for better tracking. Chief instructors, I think a lot of them experience there's a little hesitation to unlocking examining authority because it's like, oh well, that's a lot of additional liability that I have now. I got to train for that. What am I going to build? What's my cadence going to look like? What tools do I have for this? And so what we're trying to say is, we understand these pain points. We have tools used by actual DPEs that we're going to give to you. And so you use those. We start bringing more of the knowledge of these guys to you. And then you build that data set. That's what's provided to the FAA for better oversight. If they're going to lack resources to track more schools with EA, then there better be better data and better systems in place. That's the real big push behind it.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, it is an increased liability, but I think it needs to happen. If we're going to certify students faster, because right now I've had buddies flying out to middle of nowhere Nebraska just to go get a DP, just a slot with a DP, and vice versa. And there's just so many inefficiencies there. But I think put it all in one bucket, like you said. I work in software, so I mean, having just a common shared tool will astronomically improve just the quality of life for any DPE, but also for the students. I mean, just think of the students' flight training if they weren't preparing for the gouge. It's the last thing you want to
Well-
hear as a student. Don't get me wrong.
Well,
I love it.
I remember everybody asking. By the way, just a little side note: if you don't know what a gouge is because you are a student pilot, a gouge is like
You
a
will by the end
write-up.
of your training.
Yeah, you will by the end of your training. A gouge is a write-up about a DPE. It says, "Hey, this is what they do. These are the airports they go to. At this point, they're going to do a soft field landing and a short field landing, and you're going to go do stalls in this cadence, and you're going to go over this place and do a maneuver over this thing." That's what a gouge is, and I used to ask what the gouge was as an instructor because I want my student to pass, and I wanted my pass rates to be high. So, I mean, I'm guilty of asking for them. And I asked students who went, I said, "Give me the gouge, write everything down the moment you're done. Literally, I don't even want to debrief with you until you finish that." So I have done that in the past, but it's not the best way. You don't create the best pilots like that. But also the DPs that don't change it up and they just do the same thing over and over and over again create that same problem, right? So I don't know. There's positives and negatives to it, but I think I want to kind of jump into something else on the technology side. And Carson, if you want to,
yeah, this caught my attention right away, so I wanted to flag it and ask the question. You've worked with multiple aviation software companies. So what are the big inefficiencies that really stand out that you've seen in GA that you think your technology or others could be solving?
Yeah, I mean, for mine, it's very specific, and that's kind of the intention all along. It's what's one segment of training specifically that is quite a pain point, something more manual and tedious, very very segmented or siloed. And so, I knew this problem existed because I knew a lot of DPEs, and I knew schools obviously that spend a lot of time trying to track down, availability and who's uh, last minute changes, what that looks like, making sure everybody's got their information, their data, their documents. So I was very familiar with kind of the pains here, and I knew that there was definitely a good solution that could be had within just what we're trying to do. But then you look at where else is there potential use of data that's being wasted, and that's when I get into the the flight exam quality management. Getting check instructors utilizing the tools we provide to DPEs, like a virtual plan of action for randomization. It's like those are usually lost and just not really tied back into training at all. Well, I want to learn from that. I want to see what occurred, tie back to the actual lesson, whether it's just stage check, E or C or whatever. And I want to track trends over time for that check instructor, which ties back to my student and ties back to my instructor by itself to say, okay, what can we improve on? If there's one specific ACS question or code that we're seeing repeatedly missed in stage 2 private, well then we need to address that, right? So let's gain visibility into it. So that was from our perspective, just talking about one segment of flight training that we're trying to focus on is it's that piece, right? Bring it all together. Anything that touches an exam, flight exam is everything. It's everything that goes into it. It's all the information, all the documentation, and then all the way to the scheduling and completion of it, right? It's the entire process. So that's ours that we've really been focused on. The rest of it, I think you're going to see a lot more of how do we utilize kind of the same case. How do we utilize more of this data and then implement these AI based systems because AI is very good at that to learn from it. So we're already seeing that now over the past couple of years, looking at flight data, looking at some of these amazing tools out there that are tied into the aircraft and tracking maintenance, right? Hey, I'm going to put alerts and triggers now. Number 4 cylinder is starting to burn a little hot. Yeah, it's not due for another 50 hours or so, but maybe I should go ahead and get in there and replace it anyway. So using the tools out there, putting that behind an AI engine and putting alerts and notifications in place to get ahead of potential issues, I think that's a massive market that we're going to see and are seeing changing over time. Is let's get ahead, more predictive analytics so that we don't face potentially catastrophic issues when we have a student and instructor sitting in the cockpit. So that's the examples of in-flight.
what's really funny is you kind of dovetailed directly into the next question that we were going to ask. And Carson is like an AI genius. He creates things that are unbelievable with AI. I mean, honestly, it scares me quite a bit.
Coming for his job.
It's coming for everybody's job. He showed me something the other day. I was like, hey, I want to get this information off of this website. And he was like, oh, AI made it and had 0 security. If I really wanted to, I could use my bot to delete their entire website, like unethically, of course. And I'm like, you could do that. That is absolutely unbelievable. And it's because people think that you can just go build a website with AI. I would have thought that. And I wouldn't even
You
thought there
do
was any
think that?
security. I still think that a little bit.
And until I told you that, huh?
Now I'm like scared on like the app that I'm building on Lovable. It's crazy. So I'm seeing AI change everything. I mean, in our business, it's changing all of our backend software. Literally, I had to write a report, a 23-page slide deck about me, my business, what I do in my business, and what I'm doing for the next year for my entrepreneur group. And if I would have had to do that myself, it probably would have taken me a few days and a few hours each day and do drafts, and then it just wouldn't even look pretty. I worked on AI for 30 minutes last night, and I downloaded everything the internet has on me and everything I've ever written into AI, and I created that 23-page slide deck. And then I had it branded in Stratus colors using our logo. It was unbelievable. Uh, so just AI is changing a lot of things. And I go down this diatribe right now because I want to ask you this, and I know you've touched a little bit on it, but what trends do you see coming in aviation technology over the next 5 to 10 years, inside or outside of the cockpit? What are your thoughts?
I see a lot more utilization of flight-based simulation, right? Just in general, I think the regs are going to change, right? So I think that that's going to change a lot of training by itself because there's going to be a lot more hours. The systems themselves are getting so much more powerful, and then you get into the VR systems and AR, so students can take this, this power home with them to do training. I think those are going to be a huge growth sector. And then you slap on, an LLM behind some of those systems, and that tracks to the individual student, the instructor, and you start seeing trends over time. And we're just going to learn from that to figure out how to be more efficient training. So I think that the flight simulation piece is big. Up to the aircraft side. If you go upstream outside of GA, get into the BA commercial world, what these systems will be able to do and produce within even EFBs. And you think of weather, like how much better weather is going to be predictively in the future with more satellite-based systems and better modeling. And then you pump that into a solid EFB, like you predict out 3 days in advance where you're going to be. And then you take information like that backed by ADSB, and one, you can say, okay, well, I'm going to hit something here in the future, or you take that against an aircraft itself. You're going to see that in flight planning solutions, I think, is if I can predictively, potentially, by utilizing routing, historical, and ADSB based traffic against weather and against the routes for the day, I can potentially predict where there might be a collision in the future, right?
Or even something as small as turbulence. Like you could start avoiding turbulence, not fully, but in large ways, just by changing your flight routes using adaptive AI.
Or even just if you take the weather, more real time, depending on what the model looks like, pump through an EFB, or even, if avionics companies want to get into it, but, active alerts, I'm flying here and all of a sudden, there's radar or satellite systems are doing their job. And they're saying you have potentially severe turbulence right here. You can't see it. Nobody's reported it. Nobody knows it's even there, but it can see it, and it pops an alert into you, into your cockpit, and it's like you really need to turn 20 degrees right, or something that's like you need to get out of this path. I know you can't see anything, but there's something there that you don't want to get into. So I think that the technology is getting so advanced that you'll see a lot of things like that across all markets and all segments of GA. And it's going to try to determine, how do we provide the best situational awareness, but what everybody's doing. Everybody's building their own LLM from this. Like you look at Cirrus with the new G3 that pushed out on the Vision Jet, right? Like more automation. It's amazing. Everything gets done in increments because eventually everybody knows that AI is going to be flying in a cockpit. We may not have full replacement of that pilot, but they will be a systems operator managing that system while AI is doing everything else, right? And so everything happening right now is training the model of how do we safely fly in all segments of aviation. Like this is coming. We all know it's coming. That's what we're witnessing, and we're kind of the guinea pigs as the pilots, plucking away and trying to break everything while the model is learning. Like, oh, here's the situation.
That's true.
So it's going to be interesting. The next 5 to 10 years is going to be real interesting in aviation.
I can't wait. Well, I know we're running low on time, but we have one more question for you.
And it's one I like to wrap up with. And I'm especially interested to hear how you feel about it, as a pilot and a tech entrepreneur. What's one thing you wish that every student pilot really knew before they started their flight training? I think you work in a really interesting space for this one.
Yeah, it's hard. I guess, it also depends on, I'd say, what type of flying do they want to do? Do they just want to be a GA pilot and fly themselves around, or are they going the
I would say for this career, probably.
career path? Yeah, I think one thing they need to understand, and there's been a lot of changes over recent years as far as like the funding aspect of it. Like, be prepared for the funding. I think you guys are part of that, obviously, with Stratus and getting the information out. So I think that's changed quite a bit. I think that a lot of individuals coming into it don't realize just how vast the space is, like how many different jobs there are. Just do your homework. If you want to go career path, maybe you're only thinking airline, but do your homework and realize that there's so many different jobs you can do in professional aviation that don't involve just going to the airlines, right? You might get through your training, get to a commercial, and then all of a sudden somebody's throwing an opportunity to go fly a King Air, in unknown parts of the world, going dark on special missions, right? And maybe that's really cool flying that you want to do, and that's real world operating under business aviation. So do your homework on all the different types of professional aviation there are so you understand it. And then think about, what do you think you want your life to look like? Because if you want to be able to go out and fly that day and get back that night with the family, then airline job isn't going to be the best for you, right? But maybe a corporate job flying a jet for a bank out and back that day, maybe that's a better bet for you. So just do your homework on all the different types of professional aviation. Ask the flight school, ask instructors, ask pilots that and be thinking about that whenever you get into it, because you might not have to go the entire path on training if you're really wanting to get over here, right? Maybe you don't have to go all the way over here. So
Well, that's fantastic. We really appreciate you having you on today on the podcast. If anybody wanted to reach out and either find you, your company, etc., can you give us the 50,000 foot view so we could let our listeners or watchers know where to find you?
yeah, absolutely. Anybody with any questions, we have a website. It's PilExOS.com. And so it's PilExOS.com. You can reach out to sales at PilExOS.com. If you're a DPE or a flight school interested in implementing the system for your operations, just to streamline it, as we continue to grow, the more we bring into the system, obviously, the more streamlined it gets for everybody trying to search and coordinate. So that's a really powerful thing. And then any other providers in the market that are looking at partnerships, integrations, obviously we want to do that. I think there's a lot of power on that and tying into existing systems. So love to have the conversation and see what we can do.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Adam. By the way, we also have Adam's information in the show notes below in whatever streaming platform you listen to us on. And as always, if you want to reach out to either Carson or myself, you can reach us on our emails, brandon@aviationmentors.com, or Carson for producer, it's producer @ or, of course, our favorite way to find us is on LinkedIn. You can just look for the most handsome guys on LinkedIn with our names, Brandon Martini, Carson Vasquez, and I'm sure Adam has one as well. We'll have the links to all of that below. Also, don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, share, all the things you're supposed to do on social media. It really helps us grow the podcast, and more importantly, helps us grow our aviation community, and we're able to help more student pilots. So thank you so much for listening or watching us today. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Adam. It was great having you. And thank you, everyone else, for listening. As we wrap up for the day, remember, here to guide you in your aviation journey. So fly safe and enjoy the ride.
See ya.